As you can imagine, I've come across some fairly ridiculous laws in my time. But if this idea for TV licensing becomes law, it will be quite probably the most ridiculous, dictatorial kick in the teeth to your freedom of choice that I have ever seen. So allow me to explain. But first of all, please do bump the subscribe button. I very quickly feel like I'm becoming the voice of reason when it comes to law and what's going on in the UK at the moment. So please do subscribe. And if you want my personal views on things, do check out my brand new channel, Black Belt Barrister, off the record, linked below. And I will tell you what I really think. Thank you so much to all of you that have subscribed so far. Almost 40,000 of you in just a couple of days. And the first video, almost 500,000 views. So I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I speak my opinions and I hope that I speak the truth. So thank you for joining me for these talks. Let's get down to business. So this one here opens with an article from The Telegraph. I'll link both of these below. This one opening from The Telegraph. BBC boss pushes for higher license fee after grinding cuts. Now, it's essentially a complaint that the BBC has lost funding, is not being treated as an investment vehicle, etc. And there are concerns that they don't get enough funding, therefore they want to push for a higher fee. That's one thing. But where it says here, I do not want universal funding, I want proper investment and not begrudging, grinding cuts to the BBC, which you've had in the last 10 years, which have just not helped, he says. The call for investment amounts to a demand for a higher license fee, which makes up 2/3 of the BBC's income. And not to forget, whilst we're discussing this, just put this into context for a moment. The Communications Act, which requires you to pay for a TV license. I mean, international viewers will find this utterly bizarre that we still have this. But Section 363 of the Communications Act requires that if you watch or record live TV, or you install any apparatus for that purpose, you need a license. And that includes BBC content on BBC iPlayer. So regardless of what channel you're watching, regardless of what platform you're watching it on, and regardless of what device you're watching it on, regardless from where in the world this TV program is broadcast, you're required, if you watch or record it, or you install anything for that purpose, which is the difficult one to prove, but unless you've used it, of course, for that purpose. But if you do any of those things, regardless of it being BBC content, you need to pay for a license, which funds the BBC. This is utterly bizarre, but that is exactly what happens. So they are pushing for a higher fee because they say they've got cuts to their funding, etc. It's not being treated as a proper investment, etc. The current fee stands at £174.50. And this is due to go up in line with inflation. And until the end of the current charter, which is 2027. But the biggest problem then comes, what do we do after 2027? Now, there's two possibilities here. Either they scrap it altogether and move to another kind of model like Netflix. So if people really do want to watch BBC content and fund BBC, they can pay for the subscription. That would be the fairest way of doing it, because take Netflix for the example. If you pay for Netflix, that's because you want to pay for Netflix and you want the choice of watching Netflix. Some people pay for it and don't use it. There's an argument they can save money there. If they don't watch it, why pay for it? But some people just like the choice. Some people always watch Netflix. Some people pay for YouTube Premium because you get YouTube without the ads. Whatever you pay for, you choose to pay for. So be that Disney, be that any of the other packages that you can pay for by way of subscription model, you are choosing to pay for it, and therefore you know that your money goes to the company that you're watching it with. The TV license, on the other hand, is not quite like that. The TV license, begrudgingly to many people, is a fee that you pay that funds the BBC, even if you are watching other TV companies. So a lot of people don't agree with it anyway. But the biggest problem comes from the article that I've read from GB News. Now, I know that this has been discussed a lot in the past, and it starts to feel that it may well be coming true, at which point I think, well, I'll tell you why there's a huge problem with it afterwards, but here's the problem. The current chairman now says that because the current charter expires in a couple of years' time, And because the UK government and the BBC must now agree on a new funding model, and because the BBC chairman has dismissed advertising because they say it would kill off ITV, and dismissed a Netflix-style subscription, prefers instead, wait for it, linking it to council tax. Now, not only that, the amount that you pay would be determined by your property band. So the more expensive your house, the more you pay for a license you never asked for, and perhaps have no legal requirement to have, which I'll come back to in a minute. They say under this scheme, the one-size-fits-all annual £174.50 would be scrapped in favour of a progressive payment structure, where wealthier households pay more, whether you use it or not. The licence fee would be collected at the same time as council tax, with rates linked to property bans. This, they say, would eliminate the evasion, mostly because it would be paid for through council tax. They don't want it entirely funded by the government because then it leaves the BBC open to influence from the government of the day, which would be fair enough, although it's not without its criticism anyway, but I'll leave that to other commentators. But they also say that it gets rid of the whole enforcement issue, save for those that don't pay their council tax, because the enforcement is a problem. I mean, criminalising non-payment of a TV licence, I think, is a shambles anyway. I don't think that should be criminalised. At best, it should be a civil recovery, and they should still have to prove it. That, ironically, would bring the standard and the burden of standard of proof down, because it'd be a civil case rather than a criminal case. But at the moment, they say it's a problem. Well, I say it's a problem for those that are convicted in their absence, because well over 90% of people convicted of this are convicted, many of whom are convicted without ever turning up, because it goes down the single justice route. Now, this is my guidance to you never to ignore these things, because you're likely just to be convicted in your absence. Magistrate will wave these through saying, well, didn't bother to turn up, didn't want to make any representations, being prosecuted, therefore, well, finding that they're guilty. I think that's wrong, personally. I think that should be overhauled as it is. But I've discussed that in other videos. But the point here is, they say that it would get rid of this evasion issue, save for those that avoid paying their council tax, because for the majority of people, do pay the council tax. So if implemented, a council tax linked system would see households paying this at higher bands for BBC services, essentially, than in lower council tax bands, who would end up paying less than the current flat rate. Now, there's a problem with this, because this would require a change in the law. Now, allow me to explain. If you want my personal views again, if they don't come through already, check out my Off the Record channel. I'll link that below, and videos to come on that. I'm waiting for that channel to be sort of verified with all the watch hours currently, because if you do too much too soon, it sort of flags it up, and obviously it's got a lot of views because it's a brand new channel. So do bear with me for the next videos. But allow me to explain the law as it applies to this problem here. Section 363 of the Communications Act. The license required for a TV receiver. A television receiver must not be installed or used unless the installation and use of the receiver is authorized by a license. So, in short, you are guilty of an offence if you install an apparatus for the purpose of, and you watch or record live TV, regardless of the device, regardless of the channel, etc., as I've just explained. That makes it an offence to do any of that without a license. And the explanatory notes here, which, again, it tells you what these are for. This section is to prohibit the installation or the use of a television receiver without a license issued by the BBC, and makes it an offence punishable by a fine for any person to install or use a television receiver, or to have a television receiver in his possession under his control, intending to install or use it without a license, etc. And there are exemptions, etc., for business dealers, but ultimately it would be an offence. Now, the problem here is to link the payment of a license fee to council tax is forcing people to pay for this license, regardless of whether or not they actually need one. Because this law says that if you install it for this purpose or you watch or record live TV, you need a license. Now, that would be a little bit like linking a fishing license. I don't know the intricacies of a fishing license. I used to. I looked it up years ago, but I've forgotten what most of them are. But it would be a little bit like forcing upon you a fishing license when you may never have any intention of going fishing ever. So why would you pay for a fishing license? It would be a little bit like forcing upon you payment for, I don't know, some kind of driving license entitlement or whatever, if you've never any intention of driving, or likewise any other kind of license that you've never any intention of doing. So why on earth would it be possible to force upon you the requirement to pay for a license for TV if you don't need one? So to be, again, absolutely crystal clear, if you only ever watch on-demand services, you only ever watch, let's say, Netflix, but not the live bit of Netflix. There's only a small amount, I think, of Netflix that is live. If you only ever watch on demand and nothing is ever live, or you only ever watch DVDs, or you only ever watch your TV or your laptop or whatever it is for games, or YouTube that is not live television programs broadcasting on YouTube, there's all sorts of complications there. But if you don't watch anything that is considered live TV and you don't record anything that's considered live TV, you shouldn't ordinarily need a license. So in my view, this, if it were to be implemented, would stand to be unlawful as it is right now, because it forces upon you the requirement to pay for something you actually don't need. It forces upon you the requirement to pay for a license without which it would be an offence to do those things. So in my view, that would be unlawful and it would be open to challenge. And I think there's a great many people would be willing to assist in that challenge. I think many people would crowdfund a lawful challenge by way of judicial review to that. So therefore, what would have to happen is a change in the law. Because if it's unlawful as it stands, it would require a change in the law. And that would have to go through the House of Commons, which with their supermajority, Labour would probably wave through like it's just a ceremony. But then it would have to go to the Lords as well. And I would certainly hope that there'd be enough, because I've seen enough debate and discussion about this previously. I would certainly hope that there'll be enough common sense to say that we should not be forcing upon everybody, just carte blanche, the entire nation. Siri responds when I don't actually need it to. The entire nation a license that they didn't want. Just because some people do evade it. Now, obviously, as a barrister here, I have to encourage people that do watch or record live TV or install apparatus for that purpose, that they should pay a license as it stands, because at the moment it's a criminal offence to watch or record or whatever with no license. So as a barrister, I have to encourage you to comply with the law. I may not agree with the law. That's another thing. People sometimes in the comments when I say that say, you agree with this, and that's not true. It's not necessarily true, because just because I tell you what the law is doesn't mean I say that it's encouraged. Now, for example, on that, I keep around here a folding pocket knife because I open boxes and stuff with it. This is perfectly legal to carry around because it's a folding pocket knife. It's immediately foldable at all times. It is no more than 3 inches. Do I recommend and do I encourage carrying this around in public? No, I don't, because this is razor sharp. And so it's legal to carry around, save for certain places like, schools, hospitals, whatever, courts. Obviously, you can't carry them there. Do I encourage carrying it around? No. But if someone asks me what the law is, I will tell you what the law is. Just like your mobile phone. It is perfectly legal, within reason, to use your phone in the car if it is in a cradle, if it's supported by a cradle, so long as your attention is not diverted such that you are driving without due care and attention. But if it is in a cradle and not in your hand, which is Regulation 110, then you can. Now, police officers have said before that they are loath to tell people that because then people will think that that's just generally encouraged, generally okay. Now, that's not quite the same thing. I will tell you what the law is. I will tell you whether I recommend it or not. So my recommendation is, even if it's in a cradle, just leave it the hell alone. If you're using it as a sat-nav, fine. But otherwise, leave it alone. Don't send messages. Don't make calls. Just leave it alone, because you do risk being caught up in driving without due care and attention. So I'll tell you what the law is, but not necessarily whether I agree with it or not. So here, the law is, if you watch or record live TV or you install anything for that purpose, you need a license. Do I agree with that? Honestly, no, I don't. I don't think that should be criminalized. It is what it is. The law is what it is. So I have to tell you what it is. But if they were to make it so that you have to pay the license fee via your council tax, that, in my view, would require a change in the law, because this just can't stand. It cannot say, it will be absurd to say, this is an offense if you do this thing without a license, but you're paying for the license in your council tax anyway. I think that's ridiculous. I think that is draconian. I think that is an authoritarian, dictatorial way of forcing everybody to pay for the license because everything else is failing. That's the only way of explaining it. It's the only logical reason they could have for forcing everybody to pay for this through their council tax. And I think that's wrong. I think you should have the freedom of to pay for something or not to pay for something if you want it or you don't want it. If you do not watch live TV or record live TV, why on earth should you pay for a license, which is going to be hundreds of pounds a year, depending on the size of your house? The smaller houses, according to this plan, will pay less than the current £174.50. But again, I think that's wrong regardless, because you'll still get the smaller houses that otherwise would not pay for it because they can't afford it. They'll be paying something for it regardless. So it takes the choice away from them as well. I think this is ridiculous, but here I am to talk to you about the law. I've given you my opinion, I think, in this video, but for my true opinions, check out my Off the Record channel, link below. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Please do remember to subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.